Resident Evil Extinction brought together a diverse and dynamic cast of actors, many of whom had already established themselves in various genres, particularly action, science fiction, and horror. Their combined talents gave the film a strong character foundation and helped elevate it beyond a standard zombie apocalypse movie. In this section, we explore the careers of the main actors prior to the film, their contributions to their roles, and how the film affected their careers moving forward. The lead role of Alice is once again portrayed by Milla Jovovich, who had become the face of the Resident Evil franchise since the first film in 2002. Jovovich, a former model-turned-actress, had already proven her action movie credentials with her breakout role as Lilu in The Fifth Element, 1997, a performance that demonstrated her ability to combine vulnerability with strength. Her physicality and commitment to doing many of her own stunts made her a natural fit for the action-heavy role of Alice, a genetically enhanced survivor of a global viral outbreak. By the time Extinction was released, Jovovich had already become synonymous with the franchise. Extinction deepened her portrayal by exploring Alice's psychological struggles, isolation, and her growing sense of leadership. The film helped cement her reputation as a leading female action star in Hollywood and broadened her appeal to both mainstream and genre-specific audiences. This role continued to define her career and led to her reprising the character in subsequent sequels. Oded Fehr joined the franchise in Resident Evil Apocalypse and returned in Extinction as Carlos Oliveira, a former Umbrella operative turned survivor and freedom fighter. Fehr was already well known for his role as Ardith Bey in The Mummy, 1999, and The Mummy Returns, 2001, where he showcased a quiet intensity and a natural gravitas that lent itself well to action-adventure roles. In Extinction, Carlos's arc is significantly more emotional, as he evolves from a hardened survivor into a selfless hero who ultimately sacrifices himself. Fehr's performance was praised for its depth and emotional resonance, and the film allowed him to showcase a more vulnerable and noble side of his character. While Fehr continued to work in television and film after Extinction, his role in the Resident Evil franchise remains one of his most iconic. Ollie Larter makes her first appearance in the series as Claire Redfield, a fan-favorite character from the Resident Evil video games. Prior to this film, Larter was known for her roles in Final Destination, 2000, and Legally Blonde, 2001, and had garnered attention for her role in the television series Heroes. Claire Redfield in Extinction is portrayed as a pragmatic, strong-willed leader of a convoy of survivors. Larter brought a grounded, human touch to the role, emphasizing resilience and empathy over brute force. Her addition to the cast was a strategic move to introduce a well-loved game character and expand the film universe. The positive reception of her performance led to her reprising the role in later installments, further intertwining her acting career with the franchise. Ian Glenn returned as Dr. Isaacs, a character who had a smaller presence in the previous film but becomes the primary antagonist in Extinction. Glenn, a classically trained actor known for his work in British theatre and film, had a long career before joining Resident Evil. He would later become widely recognized for his role as Ser Jorah Mormont in Game of Thrones. In Extinction, Glenn's portrayal of Isaacs transforms from cold corporate scientist to monstrous creature, offering a chilling depiction of obsession and hubris. His ability to move seamlessly from calculating villainy to physical menace contributed significantly to the film's sense of dread. His performance helped solidify him as a reliable actor for complex villain roles in high-concept narratives. Ashanti, a popular R&B singer and actress, was cast in the supporting role of Betty, a convoy medic. Although her acting experience was relatively limited compared to the rest of the cast, her presence was part of a broader trend at the time of incorporating pop culture figures into genre films to attract a wider audience. While her screen time was limited, Ashanti's inclusion brought additional publicity to the film, especially among younger viewers and fans of her music. Her character's compassionate demeanor added emotional weight to the story, and although her performance received mixed reviews, it did not significantly affect her music career either positively or negatively. Spencer Locke played Kmart, a young girl rescued by Claire and raised among the convoy members. Locke was relatively new to film at the time, having appeared in several TV shows. Her character represented the theme of lost innocence and the struggle for hope in a world overrun by death. While she had a minor role in Extinction, it led to her returning in later installments and growing alongside the franchise. Her involvement with Resident Evil gave her exposure to a global audience and became one of her most recognized roles. Mike Epps returned as LJ, providing a mix of comic relief and emotional depth. Known for his stand-up comedy and roles in films like Next Friday, 2000, Epps brought levity to the otherwise grim tone of the series. In Extinction, his character was given more dramatic material, including a tragic arc that culminated in his infection and death. Epps handled the balance between humor and heartbreak with surprising nuance. While this film didn't redefine his career, it showed a different side of his acting ability, proving he could carry more serious dramatic scenes. Christopher Egan played Mikey, the tech-savvy communications officer of Claire's convoy. Although a secondary character, Egan brought a sincerity to his role that made Mikey memorable among fans. Prior to Extinction, he was best known for television roles and would later go on to star in Dominion, a TV series loosely inspired by Legion. His performance in Extinction helped set the stage for his future genre roles. In sum, Resident Evil, Extinction was a turning point for several members of its cast. It reinforced Milla Jovovich's status as a queen of action cinema, provided Oded Fehr with one of his most respected roles, and introduced Ollie Larter to a whole new fanbase. The film also allowed Ian Glenn to showcase a broader range of villainy and contributed to his casting in other high-profile fantasy projects. For younger actors like Spencer Locke and Christopher Egan, Extinction served as a gateway into the world of genre films. And for musicians like Ashanti, the film represented a brief foray into acting that added an extra layer of diversity to the ensemble. The collective impact of the cast helped the film strike a balance between action, horror, and humanity, ensuring its place as one of the more memorable entries in the franchise. Resident Evil, Extinction arrived at a time when zombie media was undergoing a dramatic resurgence. The early to mid-2000s saw a boom in undead-themed content across film, television, video games, and literature. Extinction, as the third installment in the Resident Evil film series, capitalized on and contributed to this trend in significant ways, becoming both a product of and a shaper of its cultural moment. It not only impacted pop culture through its stylistic and narrative choices, but also resonated with deeper societal anxieties of its time. Over the years, the film has inspired discussions, parodies, memes, and fan interpretations, proving its endurance in the cultural imagination. When Extinction was released in 2007, the world was still reeling from the effects of 9/11, the Iraq War, and the growing mistrust in institutions, particularly corporations and governments. The film's portrayal of the Umbrella Corporation as a cold, manipulative entity conducting experiments at the expense of humanity played into the widespread unease with unchecked corporate power and scientific overreach. The idea of a virus wiping out the majority of the planet and turning humans into a faceless, violent mass was more than just a horror trope. It mirrored the societal fear of invisible threats, pandemics, and bioterrorism. These themes would gain even more relevance in later years, especially during global health crises. One of the key contributions of Extinction to pop culture was its reimagining of the post-apocalyptic genre with a desert wasteland aesthetic. Moving away from the enclosed urban settings of the previous two films, Extinction embraced open landscapes reminiscent of Mad Max, blending zombie horror with survivalist action. This shift influenced later media that sought to portray a scorched earth scenario. The film's visual identity, dusty ruins, desolate highways, and rusted-out convoys, was echoed in future projects such as The Walking Dead, Book of Eli, and various video games, including later Resident Evil titles and similar franchises. Milla Jovovich's portrayal of Alice contributed significantly to the ongoing evolution of the female action hero archetype. Although not the first of her kind, Alice stood out for her consistent presence across the series, her combination of brute strength and emotional vulnerability, and her central role in the narrative. Extinction marked a pivotal moment in her character development, emphasizing not only her enhanced abilities, but her growing sense of isolation and burden. This portrayal resonated particularly with female audiences who saw in Alice a figure of empowerment, independence, and resilience. The film helped pave the way for more complex and physically capable female leads in action and horror cinema. The character of Claire Redfield, introduced in this installment and played by Larter, was another nod to the film's commitment to highlighting strong female figures. The inclusion of multiple capable women in leadership roles challenged the traditionally male-dominated structure of survival narratives and added diversity to the portrayal of post-apocalyptic heroes. This emphasis on female strength has since become more prominent in the genre, seen in films like The Hunger Games, Annihilation, and A Quiet Place. On a more niche but notable level, Extinction contributed to the meme culture surrounding the Resident Evil franchise. Its dramatic set pieces, overly serious tone, and stylized action sequences became fodder for internet humor, particularly among gaming communities already familiar with the series' roots. Screenshots, one-liners, and fight scenes were often shared online with humorous captions or edits, reflecting the unique tone of the movie that walked the line between sincere action and over-the-top spectacle. The Resident Evil films, including Extinction, are frequently cited in discussions about the so-bad-it's-good category of cinema, though Extinction was among the better-received entries. From a fan culture standpoint, Extinction helped further cultivate a devoted Resident Evil fanbase that merged gamers, horror fans, and action enthusiasts. Cosplay inspired by Alice's desert outfit, Claire's tactical gear, and even Umbrella's lab uniforms became commonplace at conventions. Fan fiction and fan art proliferated, often expanding on the relationships between characters or imagining alternate futures in the same universe. The film became a touchstone for fan creativity and engagement, especially in online spaces like forums, fanfiction sites, and later on, social media platforms like Tumblr and Reddit. The movie's environmental backdrop, a world transformed into an arid, desert wasteland, also sparked dialogue around climate change and environmental collapse, even if unintentionally. As desertification and resource scarcity became more discussed in real-world contexts, Extinction's setting took on new relevance. The idea that nature could be so fundamentally altered by human experimentation and viral manipulation echoed fears about humanity's impact on the planet. Although the film didn't directly tackle these themes, its world-building contributed to a growing body of dystopian fiction that blurred the lines between science fiction, horror, and ecological commentary. Extinction's music and aesthetic sensibilities also left their mark on pop culture. The use of industrial rock and electronic music in key scenes helped set a tone that would be echoed in later zombie and action media. The fusion of high-octane soundtrack with slow-motion violence, stylized combat, and visual grit became a template for similar films in the late 2000s and early 2010s. This influence can be seen in movies like Underworld, Rise of the Lycans, and even in certain segments of the DCU, where style often intersects with destruction and darkness. The film's release also coincided with a time when the line between video games and films was becoming increasingly blurred. While earlier game adaptations had failed to capture the depth or feel of their source material, Extinction embraced its origins and leaned into the hyperreal elements of video game storytelling, superhuman abilities, boss battles, level-like progression through environments. This approach influenced how future game adaptations were handled, with studios beginning to embrace the gamey elements instead of toning them down. In this sense, Extinction was part of a turning point in how Hollywood viewed interactive media. Resident Evil, Extinction marked a major shift in both tone and production style for the franchise. Following the urban settings and relatively claustrophobic action of the first two films, Extinction expanded the world of Resident Evil into an apocalyptic desert landscape. The decision to radically alter the setting and visual style required a different approach to filmmaking, and the result was a production filled with logistical challenges, creative risks, and ambitious storytelling. Behind the scenes, Extinction was both a continuation of the franchise and a reinvention of its cinematic language. Russell Mulcahy, known for directing Highlander and numerous music videos throughout the 1980s, took the director's chair for Extinction. This was a significant change, as the previous two films had been directed by Paul W. S. Anderson. Anderson remained involved as a writer and producer, but his choice to pass the directorial reins to Mulcahy brought a new stylistic sensibility to the series. Mulcahy's background in visually striking narratives made him an ideal choice to handle the film's shift from science fiction horror to a post-apocalyptic survival story. His work on music videos for bands like Duran Duran and Elton John had taught him how to blend style and substance, and that influence is visible throughout the film's gritty, hyper-stylized visuals. Principal photography began in 2006, with filming taking place in Mexico and Nevada. The production utilized real desert environments, including locations around Mexicali and the Mojave Desert. These settings provided an authentic, sun-scorched backdrop that reinforced the film's themes of desolation and survival. Shooting in such remote and harsh environments posed significant challenges. Temperatures often soared above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, creating physically demanding conditions for cast and crew. Despite the discomfort, the choice to shoot on location instead of relying solely on CGI or sets gave the film a tangible realism that helped immerse the audience in its dystopian world. One of the more intriguing aspects of the production was the design and construction of the convoy vehicles. To reflect the resourcefulness of the survivors, the vehicles were customized with makeshift armor, solar panels, weapons, and utilitarian modifications. Each vehicle was uniquely styled to match the personality and function of its crew, creating a mobile microcosm of society in collapse. The attention to detail in the design process made the convoy feel like a character in its own right. Production designer Edward Thomas and his team worked closely with the director to ensure that every aspect of the vehicles told a story, whether it was a school bus converted into a barracks or a fuel truck outfitted for defense. The film's stunts and action sequences required careful choreography and months of planning. Milla Jovovich, known for doing many of her own stunts, trained extensively before filming began. Her performance in Extinction involved complex fight scenes, wire work, and physical endurance. The film's opening scene, which features Alice navigating a trap-filled replica of the mansion from the first movie, was particularly challenging. It required precise timing, physical agility, and coordination between multiple departments, including stunts, special effects, and camera teams. The production took full advantage of practical effects where possible, only relying on CGI when necessary to enhance or extend the action. The creature effects in Extinction were a blend of practical prosthetics and digital enhancements. The infected crows, for example, were one of the most complex visual effects in the film. To simulate a massive flock of genetically mutated crows, the visual effects team used a combination of animatronic birds for close-up shots and computer-generated imagery for the larger swarm sequences. Creating realistic bird movement, feather textures, and attack patterns was a major technical hurdle. The team studied real bird behavior and worked with experts to ensure authenticity. The final sequence, in which the crows descend upon the convoy, was one of the most memorable and harrowing scenes in the film, thanks to the seamless integration of effects and live-action performance. The Tyrant, a grotesque mutation of Dr. Isaacs, was another visual and technical milestone. The transformation scene required hours of prosthetic application on actor Ian Glenn, combined with digital overlays to create the final monstrous form. This hybrid creature represented the culmination of the Umbrella Corporation's experimentation and was designed to evoke horror and awe. Its design incorporated elements of the video game's iconic boss monsters, but with new touches to make it cinematically unique. The creature's movement was achieved through a mix of motion capture and puppetry, allowing it to interact with the environment and actors in real time. There were also several stories of camaraderie and hardship behind the scenes. During filming in the Mexican desert, the cast bonded over the extreme conditions. Long days, heat exhaustion, and limited access to luxury forced everyone into a tight-knit group. Larter recalled in interviews how the physical demands of the role helped her get into character as Claire Redfield, a leader constantly pushed to the edge. Milla Jovovich described the shoot as one of the toughest she'd ever done, but also one of the most rewarding, citing the desert location as both punishing and visually inspiring. The unity among the cast helped elevate the ensemble dynamic seen on screen. From a technical standpoint, Extinction benefited from advances in digital filmmaking. Although shot on film, many post-production effects were completed using the latest software tools of the time. The color grading process was particularly important, as the filmmakers wanted to give the movie a distinct, sun-bleached tone. The final product features a warm, dusty color palette that emphasizes the dryness and hopelessness of the environment. Cinematographer David Johnson, who had worked on both television and film projects, used wide-angle lenses and aerial shots to showcase the scale of the desert, while also employing tight, shaky camera work during action scenes to heighten tension. Costume design also played a role in the storytelling. Alice's wardrobe in Extinction, including her iconic scarf, utility belts, and desert-ready attire, was carefully chosen to reflect her evolution as a character. It was designed to be both functional and symbolic of her isolation and survivalist identity. The same care was given to Claire's outfit, which marked her as a leader while maintaining realism. Costume designer Magali Gadassi worked to balance visual appeal with practicality, ensuring the clothes would make sense in the harsh conditions while still being visually distinct for each character. Another key decision during production was the integration of visual callbacks to the previous films. The replica mansion used in the opening sequence, as well as the underground laboratory and the umbrella logo motif, were deliberate choices made to tie Extinction back to its roots. At the same time, the filmmakers wanted to push the story into new territory. They introduced plot elements involving clones, telekinesis, and large-scale global destruction, signaling a departure from the more contained narratives of the earlier films. These creative risks were hotly debated during production, but the team ultimately embraced a go big or go home philosophy. Resident Evil: Extinction functions as both a continuation of the existing narrative arc in the Resident Evil film franchise and a reinvention of the story's direction. By the third installment, the world depicted in the films had radically changed. No longer confined to secret laboratories and collapsing cities, Extinction presents a fully global apocalypse in which the Umbrella Corporation's viral outbreak has devastated the planet. Its plot and structure reflect a hybrid of genres, blending post-apocalyptic road movie, action thriller, horror, and even elements of westerns. The narrative structure, while maintaining a traditional three-act form, allows space for character-focused subplots and dramatic shifts in setting and tone. The film opens with a deceptive prologue that initially suggests a return to the original film's haunted house setting. A woman who appears to be Alice navigates the same deadly booby-trapped mansion that began the first movie. She steps through familiar corridors, fights off Umbrella security, and ends up killed, only for it to be revealed she is not the real Alice, but a clone. Her body is dumped into a pit filled with dozens of other failed clones. This opening functions as both a homage and a thematic reset, showing how the events of the past are being repeated and manipulated by the Umbrella Corporation, which continues to experiment with Alice's DNA to control the virus. From there, the narrative shifts to the present day, where the real Alice has gone into hiding, traveling alone through the deserts of the American Southwest. The world is unrecognizable, cities are overrun, the oceans have dried up, and humanity has been reduced to scattered bands of survivors. The desert setting introduces a tone of isolation and decay, marking a stark contrast from the urban chaos of the previous two films. Alice's solitary journey is contrasted with a convoy of survivors led by Claire Redfield, a new character who plays a central role in the human resistance. Members of the convoy include returning characters like Carlos Oliveira and LJ, as well as new faces like Betty and Mikey. The story begins to unfold in two parallel threads: Alice's journey through the wasteland and the activities of Umbrella's underground research facility, where Dr. Isaacs is using clones of Alice in an attempt to domesticate the infected and control the T-virus. These threads eventually converge, but the film keeps them largely separate for the first half, creating a dual narrative structure that builds tension and mystery. Alice is portrayed as haunted and increasingly powerful, exhibiting telekinetic abilities that suggest her DNA has further mutated due to Umbrella's past experiments. The first major turning point occurs when Alice encounters Claire's convoy, rescuing them from a mutated crow attack in one of the film's most memorable action sequences. The group, recognizing Alice from past events, allows her to join them. This sets up the film's central dynamic, the conflict between survival and sacrifice, trust and fear, and the growing power of Alice contrasted against the humanity of the convoy. Their journey toward potential safety becomes the film's main physical and emotional trajectory. As the convoy moves from one desolate outpost to another, the story shifts into its second act. The middle section of the film is structured around a series of escalating challenges. These include internal struggles such as LJ's secret infection and external threats, including zombie attacks and the looming presence of Umbrella, who are tracking Alice's psychic signature using satellite surveillance. Tension builds as Dr. Isaacs becomes obsessed with capturing the real Alice, believing her blood to be the key to controlling the virus. His obsession grows increasingly unstable, providing a parallel arc to Alice's own evolving awareness of her abilities and identity. The narrative hits another critical turning point when Dr. Isaacs sets a trap by sending a horde of super-infected zombies to ambush the convoy at an abandoned radio station. The resulting attack is catastrophic. Several members of the group are killed, LJ succumbs to the virus, and Carlos is bitten. Despite the losses, Alice decides to lead the remaining survivors to the coordinates of a supposed safe haven in Alaska, a place rumored to be virus-free. This introduces a new objective and a fragile hope, anchoring the emotional stakes of the third act. The third act intensifies both plot and theme. After burying their dead, the group reaches an underground Umbrella facility in Nevada, one of the locations Alice has seen in her visions. In a selfless act, Carlos sacrifices himself by driving a fuel truck into a mass of zombies, clearing a path for the convoy to escape. Alice then infiltrates the facility alone, determined to end Umbrella's experiments and confront Dr. Isaacs. This climax is structured like a video game boss level, with Alice making her way through a series of obstacles and finally facing off against Isaacs, who has now mutated into a powerful, grotesque creature known as the Tyrant. The final battle between Alice and the Tyrant is both physical and symbolic. Isaacs, representing Umbrella's blind ambition and disregard for life, is the dark mirror to Alice's own transformation. Both are products of the same experiments, but where Isaacs has lost all control, Alice maintains her sense of purpose. Using her agility, intelligence, and developing telekinesis, Alice defeats the Tyrant in a brutal fight, triggering the facility's self-destruction in the process. Just before the building collapses, Alice discovers one of her own clones, alive and apparently stable. The scene sets up the film's conclusion and teases future developments. The real Alice, now fully aware of the scale of Umbrella's operations, vows to take the fight directly to them, promising to bring her friends along, suggesting an army of Alice clones. This ending serves as both a resolution and a cliffhanger, maintaining continuity with the larger franchise while opening new narrative possibilities. In terms of pacing, the film adheres closely to the three-act structure but includes smaller rising and falling actions that keep the momentum consistent. Early scenes establish a mood of isolation and tension. The second act builds suspense through interpersonal drama and set-piece action sequences, while the third act delivers a payoff with emotional losses, high-stakes conflict, and a dramatic finale. Despite its heavy use of action, the film takes time to allow characters to interact and develop, often in quiet scenes that contrast with the violent, chaotic world around them. Narratively, Extinction departs from the tight, singular plotlines of its predecessors and expands the story into a broader mythos. The introduction of clones, psychic powers, and global consequences signals a shift toward a more fantastical science fiction approach, diverging from the more grounded horror elements of the earlier films. This bold expansion of the story world helped redefine the franchise's direction and set the tone for the sequels that followed. Resident Evil Extinction is more than just a continuation of an action horror franchise. It is also a layered narrative embedded with themes that reflect larger existential, societal, and psychological concerns. Beneath its surface-level zombie violence and dystopian landscape lie symbols and motifs that speak to issues such as identity, control, humanity's relationship with nature, the corruption of power, and the cost of survival. Extinction marks a tonal and thematic shift in the Resident Evil film series, moving toward deeper explorations of its characters' inner worlds and the broader consequences of humanity's technological and moral hubris. One of the most prominent themes in Extinction is identity. This is explored through the character of Alice, who is not only struggling to understand her place in a crumbling world, but also grappling with the discovery of her own cloning. The opening scene introduces this theme immediately by showing a clone version of Alice navigating the mansion and being disposed of after death, thrown into a pit of identical bodies. This grim visual sets the tone for a philosophical question: what defines a person? Is it memory, experience, emotion, or simply biology? Alice's later encounter with another living clone of herself in the Umbrella facility forces her to confront the notion of selfhood in a world where her identity has been commodified and replicated. The idea that she is not unique, yet still remains the most real version, challenges traditional concepts of individuality and personhood. This theme of identity is reinforced by the recurring use of mirrors and reflections throughout the film. In one moment, Alice studies herself in a broken mirror, the shattered glass suggesting a fractured sense of self. Her growing telekinetic powers, which she does not fully understand or control, further distance her from her humanity, complicating her internal struggle. Is she becoming more than human, or less? Her powers offer protection and strength, but also isolate her. In this sense, the film presents a symbolic tension between evolution and alienation. The cloning subplot also introduces the theme of control. The Umbrella Corporation's repeated efforts to recreate Alice and manipulate the virus are reflections of humanity's desire to control nature and life itself. In Extinction, science has not only failed to control the T-virus, it has unleashed an irreversible catastrophe. Umbrella's underground laboratories, clean and clinical, stand in stark contrast to the chaos above ground, visually representing the corporation's attempt to impose artificial order on a disordered world. The company's experiments are not just about finding a cure or regaining control, they are about domination. Dr. Isaacs's desire to domesticate the undead and turn them into a workforce suggests a chilling commodification of life and death. In attempting to harness death itself, Umbrella becomes a symbol of technocratic arrogance and moral decay. Power, particularly in its corrupt and obsessive forms, is another key theme. Dr. Isaacs embodies the dangers of unchecked ambition. As the story progresses, he becomes increasingly consumed by his desire to perfect the virus and achieve control over it. His mutation into the tyrant creature is both literal and metaphorical. It is the culmination of a man who, in seeking godlike power, loses his humanity and becomes monstrous. His physical transformation mirrors his psychological descent. The tyrant's grotesque appearance, with tentacle-like appendages and deformed flesh, represents the dehumanizing effects of absolute power and the dangers of scientific overreach. In contrast, the survivors represent another thematic current: resilience and the fight for humanity. Claire Redfield's leadership of the convoy is marked by compassion, discipline, and cooperation. Their makeshift community, composed of disparate individuals banded together for survival, stands as a small but significant defiance against the collapse of civilization. Themes of unity, hope, and sacrifice are embedded in the interactions between convoy members. Even in a world overrun by death, they attempt to maintain a semblance of social order and dignity. Carlos's sacrifice to protect the group, LJ's attempt to hide his infection to avoid burdening others, and Alice's decision to protect the group at all costs all reflect a theme of moral choice amidst chaos. The symbolism of the desert setting is also important. Deserts are traditionally seen as places of trial, testing, and transformation. In religious and mythological narratives, characters often wander through deserts to confront their inner demons or undergo spiritual awakenings. Extinction leans into this symbolism heavily. The barren, sun-bleached landscape represents both the death of the old world and the potential for rebirth. It is a world stripped of illusion and excess, where only the essential remains. The desert is unforgiving but also purifying. For Alice, It is a crucible in which her identity is tested, her abilities are revealed, and her mission becomes clear. Nature as a force of retribution is another motif running through the film. The mutated crows, for example, are not just a horror element. They represent nature turning hostile due to human interference. Birds, traditionally symbols of freedom and transcendence, become instruments of death, infected by feeding on the undead. Their attack on the convoy is not just a physical threat, but a symbol of the natural world reacting violently to the virus's spread. This scene is rich with ecological undertones, suggesting that once the balance between humanity and nature is broken, even the sky becomes dangerous. The underground labs serve as symbolic underworlds, places where forbidden knowledge is pursued at the cost of morality. Much like the myth of Icarus, who flew too close to the sun, the umbrella scientists delve too deep, attempting to control what should not be controlled. The architecture of these labs, sterile corridors, observation chambers, and cloning vats, invokes imagery of hellish factories or Dantean infernos, where souls are lost and reborn in twisted forms. Alice's descent into the lab to confront Isaacs mirrors a mythic hero's journey into the underworld, where she must face a monstrous adversary and emerge transformed. Another recurring theme is that of memory and trauma. Alice suffers from fragmented memories of her past and visions linked to other clones. The virus, cloning, and repeated exposure to death have made her experience time and memory in disjointed ways. In this sense, her character embodies the trauma of repetition, reliving variations of the same nightmare, unable to break free. Her clones, failures discarded in mass graves, act as haunting reminders of lives that could have been hers. This is further emphasized in her brief interactions with children or moments of vulnerability, hinting at the life she might have had before the apocalypse. The idea of salvation, both physical and metaphysical, plays a subtle but persistent role in the film's structure. Alaska, repeatedly mentioned as a virus-free sanctuary, becomes a symbol of hope and redemption. Though unverified and possibly mythical, the idea of a safe haven keeps the group moving forward. It represents the human need to believe in something better, even in the face of overwhelming despair. Alaska's distant, unreachable nature gives it a dreamlike quality, echoing themes found in classic literature, where paradise is always just beyond reach, but never entirely dismissed. Resident Evil: Extinction marks a notable evolution in the franchise's visual identity. With the transition from urban chaos to post-apocalyptic desolation, the film embraced a more stylized, cinematic approach to its presentation. The look and feel of Extinction distinguish it not only from its predecessors, but also from other zombie and action films of the same era. Under the direction of Russell Mulcahy and the lens of cinematographer David Johnson, Extinction created a harsh yet beautiful visual world that mirrors its characters' emotional landscapes. Every frame is steeped in symbolic color palettes, intentional lighting choices, camera movement, and environmental composition designed to enhance both narrative and atmosphere. One of the most striking elements of the film's visual style is its desert setting. The choice to set most of the film in barren, sun-scorched environments introduced a golden, dusty aesthetic that would become a defining characteristic of Extinction. The dry and unforgiving American Southwest serves not just as a backdrop, but as a character in itself. Long stretches of desert, rusted-out buildings, and scorched remains of once thriving cities evoke a sense of loss and isolation. The decision to shoot on location in Mexico and Nevada allowed for the use of real landscapes, lending an authenticity that could not have been achieved with studio sets or green screens alone. The color palette of Extinction heavily leans into warm tones. Deep oranges, rust reds, ochres, and muted browns dominate much of the visual space. This consistent use of color not only conveys the oppressive heat and decay of the setting, but also emphasizes the thematic desolation at the heart of the story. Scenes involving umbrella laboratories or underground environments contrast sharply with cool blues, metallic grays, and sterile whites, creating a visual binary between the ruined outside world and the cold artificial control of the corporation. This contrast reinforces the central conflict between natural disorder and corporate manipulation. Lighting plays a crucial role in shaping the film's mood. Natural light dominates the exterior scenes, often harsh and overexposed, mirroring the emotional exhaustion of the characters. The sun is an ever-present, unforgiving force, bleaching the world of color and leaving behind the skeletal remains of a collapsed civilization. In contrast, interior scenes, whether inside convoy vehicles, abandoned gas stations, or underground labs, are often dimly lit or rely on flickering artificial sources. This creates a visual rhythm between wide-open desolation and claustrophobic menace. Moonlit scenes or campfires cast long shadows, emphasizing the fragility of life and the threat of the unknown in a world ruled by death. Camera work in Extinction is intentionally dynamic. The film balances sweeping aerial shots of the desert wasteland with tightly composed handheld sequences during action scenes. Wide shots are often used to emphasize the vast emptiness of the landscape, underscoring the character's vulnerability. These shots are not just scenic, they reinforce the scale of the apocalypse and the insignificance of the survivors in the face of global devastation. Meanwhile, close-up shots, often focusing on faces weathered by sun and trauma, capture the emotional intensity of quiet moments. The choice to frequently switch between macro and wide perspectives gives the viewer both a grand sense of scale and an intimate look at individual suffering. Action scenes are marked by kinetic, fast-paced editing and inventive camera angles. The infected crow attack sequence, for example, utilizes quick cuts and aerial tracking shots to simulate the chaos and unpredictability of the assault. The camera often mimics the movement of the characters, ducking, swaying, or spinning as they react to threats. This approach increases the viewer's immersion and heightens the visceral impact of the action. Slow motion is used sparingly but effectively, particularly in key fight scenes involving Alice, to emphasize her superhuman agility and control. These stylistic choices serve to elevate the action above simple choreography and turn it into a spectacle. The production design and cinematography also collaborate to create strong visual motifs. Abandoned billboards, rusting vehicles, and remnants of pre-apocalypse life are placed in scenes as visual reminders of the world that once was. Shots of highways littered with burned-out cars or decaying cityscapes frame the characters as survivors walking through the graveyard of civilization. These compositions are often symmetrical and balanced, allowing the landscape itself to tell part of the story. Even in moments of silence, the frame is full of narrative content. One recurring visual motif is the use of mirrors and reflections. Alice's journey of identity is underscored by several moments where she confronts her own reflection, sometimes literally, in broken glass or polished surfaces, and sometimes metaphorically, through her clones. The cinematography in these scenes often uses centered framing and soft lighting to highlight her internal conflict. These reflective shots are contrasted with scenes of clone experimentation, where sterile, emotionless lighting and surveillance-style camera angles remove any sense of intimacy or humanity. Special effects in Extinction combine practical techniques with CGI enhancements. The infected crows were one of the most technically challenging effects in the film. They required a seamless blend of animatronics for close-up interactions and digital flocks for wide-scale aerial assaults. The digital integration is generally well executed, with the birds casting appropriate shadows and reacting believably with the environment. The same attention to detail is seen in the depiction of zombies and the final tyrant creature. Prosthetic makeup and detailed creature design were used wherever possible, with digital overlays used to exaggerate features or movements. This blend of real and virtual helps maintain the gritty realism of the film's tone, avoiding the plastic sheen that often plagues fully digital effects. The climax of the film, set in an umbrella facility beneath the desert, offers some of the most visually compelling sequences. The sterile, glassy corridors, harsh fluorescent lighting, and symmetrical framing create a cold, inhuman environment. This artificial atmosphere provides a stark contrast to Alice's raw, emotional confrontation with Dr. Isaacs. During their final battle, the lighting flickers, alarms flash red, and shadows move erratically, reflecting the chaos and intensity of the moment. The cinematography here becomes more erratic, capturing both the scale of the threat and the personal stakes involved. Costuming and visual texture also play a role in establishing the film's visual identity. Alice's layered clothing, practical, dusty, worn, reflects her survivalist transformation and adapts visually to the setting. Her scarf, belts, and arm wraps are not only functional but also iconic, contributing to her silhouette and reinforcing her status as a post-apocalyptic warrior. Similarly, the convoy's mix of scavenged outfits, tactical gear, and handmade accessories helps build a visual world grounded in desperation and improvisation. Everything looks used, damaged, and reassembled, a visual metaphor for humanity itself in the wake of the virus. Resident Evil: Extinction uses its sound design and musical score as vital storytelling tools, deepening the tension, emotional stakes, and thematic weight of its narrative. While the film is visually rich and action-heavy, its sonic landscape is equally instrumental in crafting a cohesive atmosphere. Every scream, ambient noise, footstep on sand, and shriek of an infected crow contributes to the immersive world of Extinction. The soundtrack, curated to balance industrial aggression with haunting subtlety, reflects the hybrid nature of the film's genre, part survival thriller, part sci-fi horror, and part action spectacle. Sound in Extinction is not merely supportive, it is a central pillar of the film's identity. The film score was composed by Charlie Clouser, best known for his work with the band 9 Inch Nails and his scoring contributions to the Saw film series. Clouser's background in industrial rock and electronic music informs the tone of Extinction's soundtrack. He crafts a musical environment that is both synthetic and organic, filled with distorted tones, rhythmic pulses, and electronic textures. This kind of sound perfectly suits a post-apocalyptic narrative that blends biotechnology, viral horror, and violent rebellion. Clouser's use of grinding synths, subtle orchestral drones, and aggressive drum programming reflects the chaos of the world, the urgency of survival, and the tension between man and machine. A defining characteristic of the soundtrack is its refusal to rely on traditional orchestral swells or melodramatic cues. Instead, Clouser constructs atmospheric sound beds that build anxiety and maintain a low-frequency intensity beneath the action. In chase scenes and combat sequences, heavy percussive beats layered with distorted bass lines create a driving, almost militaristic rhythm. This rhythmic structure mirrors the character's movement and urgency, especially during sequences like the Crow attack or the underground facility raid. The score avoids predictability and instead maintains a constant unease, sometimes punctuated by sudden bursts of noise that reflect the volatility of the infected. The opening scenes of the film set the tone immediately with ambient drones and minimalist soundscapes. As the camera pans across a barren desert and abandoned towns, the music offers a subtle, mournful backdrop. Instead of overwhelming the audience, it seeps in slowly, mirroring the lifeless stillness of a world long past saving. There are moments of near silence broken only by natural sounds, wind blowing through cracked windows, sand crunching under boots, distant animal cries. These quiet stretches enhance the horror of sudden intrusions, a crow's screech, a groaning zombie, or the mechanical whine of umbrella surveillance satellites. One of the standout audio sequences in Extinction is the infected crow attack. Here, sound design takes center stage. The crow's shrill, otherworldly calls are mixed with a chaotic swirl of flapping wings, snapping beaks, and the desperate screams of the convoy members. Clouser's score during this scene builds in layers, starting with a low rumble, then increasing in tempo and volume as the attack intensifies. High-pitched strings mimic the screeching of the birds, creating a disorienting wall of sound. The fusion of sound effects and music makes the scene terrifying not just visually, but sonically. It overwhelms the senses, placing the audience in the middle of a sudden, unavoidable catastrophe. Dialogue in Extinction is delivered with clarity, but always under the influence of ambient sound. Scenes set in the open desert carry echoes and wind interference, while enclosed environments, such as the labs or vehicles, feature reverb and proximity effects. This attention to sonic space enhances realism. The world sounds hollow and empty, reflecting the psychological states of the characters. worn down, stretched thin, and alone even among others. Voices in the film often sound distant, even when characters are close, which reinforces the themes of emotional detachment and existential isolation. In more emotional scenes, the soundtrack retreats. After the loss of LJ or Carlos's sacrifice, Klauser drops the industrial aggression and replaces it with ambient textures and subtle piano motifs. The shift in musical tone in these moments is subtle but effective, allowing the weight of loss to settle without melodrama. The music doesn't try to dictate how the audience should feel but instead enhances the silence and gravity of the scenes. This restraint gives the characters' pain space to resonate more deeply. Resident Evil: Extinction also incorporates licensed music sparingly but effectively. Unlike other action films that bombard the audience with high-energy tracks, Extinction keeps its curated music use minimal and mood-specific. During the end credits, for example, the inclusion of In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida by Iron Butterfly serves as a nostalgic and eerie counterpoint to the film's futuristic horror. The song's psychedelic tone and heavy instrumental weight echo the themes of time distortion, mutation, and psychological unraveling. The contrast between the classic track and the modern dystopia leaves the audience in a liminal emotional space, unsettled, curious, and reflective. Sound effects are another key contributor to the film's atmosphere. The infected themselves are marked by a distinct audio profile, guttural snarls, rapid breathing, and erratic, animalistic screeches. These sounds evolve depending on the type of infected encountered. Standard zombies produce low, repetitive moans and wet, slapping footsteps, emphasizing their decay. In contrast, the enhanced, more aggressive zombies introduced later in the film have sharper, faster, more violent sounds, reflecting their increased lethality. The final tyrant monster, for example, is given a soundscape all its own: heavy footsteps, bone-cracking transformations, and guttural roars layered with processed vocal distortions that suggest both man and beast. Umbrella's presence is also reflected through sound. Their underground labs emit a cold, mechanical hum, punctuated by the sterile beeping of monitors, the hiss of pressurized doors, and the synthetic tones of automated systems. The lab environments are orally oppressive, clean, exact, and devoid of organic warmth. This use of diegetic sound emphasizes the sterile inhumanity of the Umbrella Corporation and its separation from the natural world above. The contrast between these controlled environments and the chaotic soundscape of the surface world enhances the divide between technological dominance and natural collapse. Vehicles, weapons, and environmental interaction are all treated with a sense of weight and realism in the sound mix. Convoy trucks rumble with worn-out engines and rattling frames. Makeshift weapons give off improvised, metallic clanks. Gunfire sounds are not exaggerated but grounded, dry, abrupt, and deadly. Even the crunch of sand under tires or boots is given attention, reinforcing the setting's physical texture through audio. Resident Evil: Extinction arrived in theaters in September 2007 as the third installment in a franchise already developing a strong cult following, despite mixed reactions from critics. As with its predecessors, Extinction faced the familiar divide between fans of the source video game series, general audiences, and professional film critics. The film was met with a variety of responses ranging from praise for its action and visual style to criticisms over its perceived lack of substance, character depth, and deviation from the source material. Nonetheless, Extinction solidified the franchise's place in popular cinema and expanded its reach, generating significant box office revenue and establishing Alice as a definitive post-apocalyptic heroine. Upon release, Resident Evil: Extinction opened at number 1 at the North American box office, earning over $23 million in its opening weekend. Globally, the film grossed more than $147 million, surpassing both of its predecessors and proving that the series maintained a strong financial draw. This commercial success indicated a solid fanbase and a continuing appetite for its unique blend of zombie horror, sci-fi conspiracy, and stylized action. It also affirmed the viability of video game adaptations at a time when many such films struggled to achieve box office success. From a critical standpoint, however, Extinction received a lukewarm reception. On aggregate review platforms, the film scored low to moderate ratings. Critics often pointed out the film's lack of narrative innovation and its sometimes cliched dialogue, arguing that it leaned too heavily on genre tropes. Some reviews described it as a competent but unremarkable entry in the zombie film genre, with flashes of style but little depth. Others criticized the pacing, particularly in the first half, citing that it took too long for the action to escalate to the expected levels. There was also some disappointment with character development, particularly regarding the supporting cast, who many felt were not given enough emotional weight or background to fully engage the audience. However, there were elements of the film that drew more positive attention. Critics generally praised the cinematography and production design, acknowledging the effective use of desert landscapes and the stark, post-apocalyptic aesthetic. The decision to move the setting from enclosed urban environments to wide, arid wastelands was seen as a bold shift that revitalized the franchise's visual identity. The infected crow sequence, in particular, was frequently highlighted as a standout set piece, visually creative, terrifying, and well executed. Reviewers appreciated the atmosphere and tone in these moments, even if they felt the broader narrative lacked cohesion. Milla Jovovich's performance as Alice received a mixed, but generally favorable assessment. Some critics argued that while the script didn't give her much emotional range, she delivered a physically committed and commanding performance that anchored the film. Her portrayal of a stoic, genetically enhanced warrior resonated with fans of action cinema, and her continued presence as the central figure in the series helped give the franchise a sense of continuity and identity. However, other critics felt that the emphasis on her character's supernatural powers came at the expense of narrative tension, as her ability to overcome obstacles sometimes removed a sense of danger or suspense from the story. Among fans of the Resident Evil video games, Extinction further deepened an ongoing debate. Some appreciated the film's independence from the game canon, enjoying it as an alternate universe that reimagined familiar themes and characters. Others expressed frustration over the increasing distance from the source material. The inclusion of Claire Redfield and the tyrant creature were seen as small nods to the games, but many felt these elements were underdeveloped or superficial. The absence of certain key characters and lore details, along with a focus on Alice, a character created for the films, continued to be a source of contention within the gaming community. Despite its critical shortcomings, Extinction did receive recognition for its technical and creative achievements. It was nominated for several genre-specific awards, particularly within horror and science fiction circles. It earned nods for Best Makeup, Best Visual Effects, and Best Action Performance in several fan-voted award shows. While it did not win major mainstream awards, these nominations reflected the film's appeal within its niche and genre fanbases. Additionally, Extinction became a staple in discussions of female-led action films, particularly in the horror and sci-fi genres, further solidifying its place in cultural discussions around representation. Beyond professional criticism, audience responses were somewhat more positive. Many moviegoers enjoyed the fast-paced action, the immersive setting, and the continuation of Alice's journey. Fan forums and online communities that focused on science fiction and horror often praised the film for its world-building and survivalist tone. Audiences appreciated the sense of escalation, both in terms of stakes and spectacle, compared to the first two films. The death of Carlos, for example, was frequently cited as one of the series' more emotional and well-executed moments, offering a rare instance of character sacrifice that felt meaningful. Still, certain elements drew backlash from viewers. Some felt that the introduction of psychic powers and cloning pushed the series too far into science fiction territory, straying from its zombie horror roots. Others noted inconsistencies in tone, with moments of genuine suspense and horror often undercut by over-the-top action or underdeveloped side plots. The inclusion of the Umbrella Corporation's underground labs and the final transformation of Dr. Isaacs into the tyrant received mixed feedback. Some considered it a satisfying culmination of the film's arc, while others found it rushed or overly reliant on CGI. In terms of controversy, Extinction avoided major scandals or problematic content that might have sparked broader outrage. However, some viewers and critics did raise concerns about the portrayal of violence and the lack of emotional consequences for certain deaths. The film's depiction of a devastated world also sparked some limited discussion about racial and geographic representation, particularly in its portrayal of a virus-ravaged globe where survivors are predominantly Western and white. These criticisms did not dominate discourse, but contributed to an ongoing conversation about diversity and representation in genre films. Resident Evil: Extinction occupies a critical position in the legacy of the Resident Evil film franchise and within the larger context of 21st-century action horror cinema. While it may not have revolutionized the genre, its long-term influence can be seen in how it reshaped the expectations for video game adaptations, contributed to the evolution of post-apocalyptic storytelling, and helped solidify female-led action narratives. Extinction was more than just the third entry in a profitable series. It marked a shift in tone, scale, and ambition that would ripple through not only future Resident Evil films, but also other media inspired by similar themes of survival, mutation, and dystopia. First and foremost, Extinction marked a stylistic and thematic departure from its predecessors, establishing the template that the remaining Resident Evil films would follow. Whereas the first film was largely contained within the claustrophobic walls of the Hive, and the second expanded into the chaos of a city outbreak, Extinction broadened the scope to a global level. The visual tone turned more desolate and apocalyptic, invoking Western influences and desert-set, survivalist imagery. This transition from urban horror to wasteland survival would become a defining feature of the franchise moving forward. Extinction proved that the series could evolve in terms of setting and theme while still maintaining its core identity of bioorganic horror and high-octane action. One of the most significant aspects of Extinction's legacy is its reinforcement of Milla Jovovich's Alice as one of cinema's most enduring female action heroes. By the time Extinction released, Jovovich had already become synonymous with the franchise, but this film deepened that identity. Her evolution from survivor to genetically enhanced warrior and ultimately to a symbol of rebellion made Alice a character who transcended genre boundaries. In a media landscape where strong female protagonists were still less common in action-heavy roles, Alice's continued centrality in the narrative paved the way for other films and franchises to lean into female empowerment without making it the sole focus of the character. The cloning subplot introduced in Extinction, particularly the final scene revealing dozens of Alice clones, became a memorable and frequently referenced element of the franchise. While some critics viewed the concept as a gimmick, fans embraced the potential for exponential narrative chaos. This idea of a single protagonist expanding into a multiplicity of versions, each potentially as powerful and driven as the original, echoed themes of identity fragmentation, loss of humanity, and unchecked scientific ambition. Future installments would run with this thread, using it to explore questions of individuality and control, albeit in increasingly stylized and sometimes surreal ways. Extinction also left its mark on how Hollywood viewed video game adaptations. Although still met with skepticism by critics, the consistent financial performance of the Resident Evil series, especially Extinction, demonstrated that there was a reliable audience for these films. Its success helped studios justify investments in other game-to-film projects. While many of those adaptations failed to find the same traction, Extinction's blend of action, horror, and dystopian world-building became a blueprint that others would attempt to emulate. Even outside of direct adaptations, the film's visual and narrative tone can be seen echoed in projects like Mad Max, Fury Road, The Walking Dead, and The Last of Us, which similarly explore human desperation in desolate, lawless landscapes. In particular, Extinction's use of a desert wasteland setting, unusual for zombie narratives at the time, helped reinvigorate the genre by offering a fresh backdrop. The combination of scorched earth aesthetics, survivalist culture, and biotechnological horror created a hybrid atmosphere that blurred the lines between zombie film, science fiction, and dystopian epic. Future zombie media, especially games like Dying Light and Dead Island, would adopt similar tones and settings, placing the undead not just in confined corridors or decaying cities, but in wide-open, unforgiving terrains where nature and infection had reclaimed the world. The portrayal of the Umbrella Corporation also continued to evolve through Extinction, influencing how evil corporations are represented in sci-fi and horror media. In Extinction, Umbrella is not only responsible for the initial outbreak, but is shown as actively experimenting on survivors and manipulating global events from an underground fortress, isolated from the suffering of the outside world. This depiction of a faceless, omnipresent organization acting beyond moral boundaries helped cement Umbrella as one of modern cinema's most iconic villainous entities. The narrative template, an elite, detached group sacrificing humanity for control or profit, would be echoed in later films, such as Elysium, Divergent, and even parts of Black Mirror, which critique corporate overreach and technological abuse. Additionally, the film contributed to the growth of the franchise's multimedia empire. The release of Extinction coincided with a wave of tie-in products, including novels, comics, merchandise, and renewed interest in the video games themselves. Although not a direct adaptation of any specific game in the series, the film's release created crossover interest that helped boost sales and visibility for games like Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 5. The feedback loop between the games and films became more pronounced after Extinction, as elements like desert settings, massive viral mutations, and combat-trained female leads began to appear more prominently in the game series. In terms of fandom, Extinction has remained a popular entry among longtime followers of the franchise. Many consider it a highlight of the six-film run, due to its combination of atmosphere, action, and its attempt to deepen the lore without losing sight of spectacle. Fan communities continue to produce content inspired by Extinction, fanfiction, cosplay, art, and video essays that explore its characters, settings, and alternate narrative possibilities. The character of Claire Redfield, introduced in Extinction, also gained a new life in fandom and was celebrated for her leadership, practicality, and layered personality, leading to expanded roles in future films. From a broader cultural perspective, Extinction contributed to the evolving conversation about post-apocalyptic media. It arrived at a time when global anxieties about disease, war, and climate change were intensifying, and the film tapped into these fears in a stylized but resonant way. The image of an Earth dried up by human arrogance, overrun by the consequences of corporate hubris and unchecked scientific ambition, mirrored growing real-world concerns about environmental collapse and pandemic threats. In retrospect, the film feels oddly prescient, anticipating the themes that would dominate cinema and television in the 2010s and 2020s. The impact of Resident Evil, Extinction extended far beyond its box office performance and critical reviews. It resonated with audiences on a more personal and symbolic level. The film came out during a time when global anxieties around pandemics, climate change, and the misuse of corporate power were at the forefront of public consciousness. Through its dystopian narrative and apocalyptic imagery, Extinction mirrored many of the fears and questions that audiences were grappling with in the real world. Viewers brought their own interpretations, emotions, and life experiences into the theater, and what they found on screen offered both escapism and reflection. This duality, spectacle paired with subtext, helped the film connect with audiences in a way that made it more than just another genre entry. For many viewers, the desolate, sun-scorched world portrayed in Extinction struck a particularly powerful chord. Unlike the dark, enclosed, and more claustrophobic environments of the earlier films, Extinction's vast desert wastelands symbolized not only physical devastation but also emotional desolation. The idea that the world had collapsed not in a sudden bang but through a slow, creeping degradation of systems and societies felt eerily plausible to many. The film's depiction of scarcity, survivalism, and the isolation of small pockets of uninfected humans mirrored growing concerns about global collapse scenarios, resource depletion, and the fragility of modern civilization. For some audiences, Extinction wasn't just fiction, it was a cautionary tale wrapped in entertainment. One of the most common audience interpretations of Extinction revolves around the theme of identity in crisis. Alice, as a genetically altered human with fragmented memories and growing powers, represented a form of existential uncertainty. She was no longer fully human but not fully a machine or clone either. Her internal struggle to retain her sense of self while dealing with constant evolution and manipulation by the Umbrella Corporation resonated with viewers facing their own uncertainties about technology, surveillance, and personal autonomy in an increasingly digital world. The scene where she watches security footage of her own clone's death, followed by her discovery of the other clones at the film's conclusion, was a moment that many viewers interpreted as a meditation on individuality, expendability, and the quest for purpose in an indifferent system. Audiences also interpreted the journey of Alice as a broader metaphor for female empowerment and resistance. Her transformation from a lone survivor into a determined leader and warrior struck a deep chord, particularly among women who saw in her a powerful, uncompromising symbol of resilience. Unlike many action heroines who are written to serve as accessories to male leads, Alice stood on her own, making choices based on her principles, her experiences, and her pain. Her physical strength, tactical mind, and emotional distance were all traits that pushed against the traditional feminine archetypes often seen in mainstream action films. She didn't exist to be saved or to inspire a male hero. She was the hero. Audiences, especially women and young girls looking for representation, gravitated toward her because she exemplified strength without needing to be softened or over-sexualized to gain acceptance. In fan discussions, blogs, and early social media commentary, many viewers also expressed appreciation for the ensemble cast. While Alice was the clear protagonist, characters like Claire Redfield, Carlos Oliveira, and even supporting figures like LJ brought depth and humanity to the story. Claire's practical leadership and moral clarity made her a relatable counterpart to Alice's haunted isolation. Fans admired how Claire embodied compassion without weakness, and how she often acted as a moral compass for the group. The death of Carlos, which some audience members described as heartbreaking, was seen as a rare moment of emotional gravity in the genre. He died not in vain, but with purpose and dignity, and this sacrifice became a fan-favorite moment, often cited as one of the most memorable in the series. The film also resonated strongly with audiences interested in survivalist culture and speculative fiction. Extinction's depiction of a post-pandemic world filled with nomadic convoys, fortified outposts, and scavenged technology felt grounded in plausibility. It was easy for viewers to imagine how society could fall apart in a similar way, and the choices characters had to make, what to protect, whom to trust, how to keep hope alive, were ones that viewers found themselves reflecting on. The concept of the convoy itself was especially popular, with many fans inspired by the idea of mobile communities and temporary civilizations adapting to a ruined world. In this way, the film inspired both philosophical reflection and a kind of imaginative roleplay, with viewers discussing online what they would do in similar circumstances, how they would survive, and what kind of leader they would be. Younger audiences, in particular, connected with the rebellious spirit of the film. The idea of taking on a faceless, powerful corporation that controls the fate of humanity resonated with a generation increasingly skeptical of big tech, pharmaceutical giants, and government inaction. Umbrella Corporation, with its cold science and calculated disregard for human life, became an easy stand-in for real-world fears. Viewers interpreted the story as a metaphor for resistance, for rising up against oppression, and for refusing to be dehumanized by systems of power. This theme is especially evident in the final act of the film, where Alice breaks into the Umbrella underground facility and confronts the tyrant version of Dr. Isaacs, a moment interpreted by many fans as the oppressed fighting back against the system that created and discarded them. The visual aesthetics and cinematography also left a lasting emotional impression on viewers. The washed-out color palette, sun-drenched skies, and crumbling ruins created a haunting atmosphere that many interpreted as symbolic of spiritual emptiness and moral decay. Even in the midst of action scenes, the environment itself felt like a character, harsh, unforgiving, and indifferent. This bleak beauty created a reflective tone, inviting viewers to think not just about the horror unfolding on screen, but about the cost of hubris, the impact of human ambition gone awry, and the fragility of the world they inhabit. For some, it even inspired an environmental reading of the film, where nature was shown not as nurturing but as a victim of mankind's mistakes. Emotional engagement with Extinction also came from its tone of lingering sorrow. Beneath the battles and mutations was a story of loss of home, of identity, of hope. Characters carried grief with them. Alice for the life she lost and the humanity she might never regain, Claire for the people she couldn't save, and Carlos for the world that no longer existed. This emotional undercurrent, while subtle, resonated with viewers who were themselves navigating grief, change, or a sense of disconnection from the world around them. Extinction offered a space to confront those feelings without directly naming them. In a world filled with infected monsters and ruined cities, the greatest threat was loneliness, and that truth echoed powerfully with audiences dealing with their own forms of isolation. Resident Evil: Extinction offers a complex, evolving tapestry of character development that goes beyond typical action horror archetypes. The film's characters are caught in a world devastated by viral apocalypse, and their personal journeys reflect not only their struggle to survive, but also deeper explorations of identity, loyalty, loss, and transformation. Central to this is Alice, whose arc drives much of the film's narrative tension, but significant growth is also seen in supporting characters like Claire Redfield and Carlos Oliveira, whose paths intersect with Alice in ways that enrich the story's emotional weight and thematic depth. Alice begins Extinction as a figure burdened by her past trauma and fragmented memories. Having escaped the hive and battled the undead in prior films, she carries the scars of those experiences, both physical and psychological. In Extinction, Alice's development is deeply tied to her evolving relationship with her humanity and her genetic modifications. She has become stronger, faster, and more capable, but also more isolated and conflicted. Early in the film, she is haunted by visions and flashbacks, grappling with the question of who she really is beneath the layers of artificial enhancement. This internal conflict adds a layer of vulnerability to her otherwise formidable exterior, making her journey more relatable and poignant. Throughout the film, Alice's motivations evolve from mere survival to a broader quest for redemption and resistance against the Umbrella Corporation's cruelty. This shift is symbolized by her growing protective instincts toward the convoy of survivors she joins. Alice transforms from a lone wolf into a reluctant leader and guardian, willing to risk herself to protect others. Her arc culminates in the daring infiltration of Umbrella's underground facility, where she confronts not only external threats but the fractured aspects of her own identity. The discovery of multiple Alice clones challenges her sense of self, raising questions about individuality, agency, and the price of power. By the film's end, Alice is no longer just a survivor but a symbol of hope and defiance, though one still burdened by uncertainty about her place in a fractured world. Claire Redfield serves as a vital foil and complement to Alice. Introduced in this film, Claire's arc is less about physical transformation and more about emotional and ethical steadfastness. Unlike Alice, whose journey is shaped by bioengineering and memory loss, Claire's character is rooted in humanity and moral clarity. She is a pragmatic, compassionate leader who prioritizes the safety of the convoy and maintains hope amid despair. Her development is shown through her growing relationship with Alice, marked by initial mistrust that gradually turns into mutual respect and partnership. Claire's arc culminates in her stepping up as a stabilizing force within the group, providing emotional grounding and a voice of reason. This makes her a relatable and vital presence, especially as the film contrasts her steadiness with Alice's volatility. Carlos Oliveira's character, though less prominently featured, offers an emotional counterpoint to the harshness of the film's world. Carlos's arc involves reconciling his past as a soldier with his current role as a protector of the convoy. He demonstrates loyalty, bravery, and a willingness to sacrifice himself for others, which culminates in a poignant death scene that underscores the film's themes of loss and sacrifice. Carlos's journey is emblematic of the human cost of the apocalypse. He is a man who fights not for glory, but for the survival of those he cares about. His death resonates strongly with audiences, highlighting the fragility of life and the bonds formed in dire circumstances. The Umbrella Corporation's Dr. Isaacs serves as a villain whose development is largely defined by his unyielding loyalty to Umbrella's objectives and his twisted scientific ambitions. While not deeply fleshed out emotionally, Dr. Isaacs's arc reflects the dangers of unchecked corporate power and dehumanized scientific pursuit. His transformation into a monstrous creature by the end of the film physically embodies the moral and ethical corruption that underpins the corporation's experiments. This arc functions as a dark mirror to Alice's own transformations, contrasting her struggle to retain humanity with Isaacs's descent into monstrosity. A noteworthy addition to the cast is the group of convoy survivors, who collectively represent various responses to apocalypse and survival. Their individual arcs may not be as deeply explored as the leads, but together they symbolize the persistence of community and hope amid devastation. Through their interactions and shared experiences, the film highlights themes of trust, betrayal, and resilience. Characters like Nick and Kmart bring moments of levity and humanity, while others grapple with fear and despair, illustrating a broad spectrum of human reactions in extreme conditions. Another important element in the character dynamics is the relationship between Alice and the convoy's leader, Claire. Their evolving bond embodies themes of trust, cooperation, and female solidarity. Initially wary of each other, their alliance strengthens as they face shared threats, creating a partnership that balances Alice's unpredictability with Claire's grounded leadership. This dynamic challenges the traditional lone hero trope common in action films and adds a layer of emotional depth to the story. Their interactions convey subtle nuances of mentorship, respect, and mutual support that enhance both characters' development. The motif of cloning and identity fragmentation is also central to understanding Alice's arc. The revelation of the multiple Alice clones at the film's conclusion introduces a complex tension regarding the uniqueness of the protagonist. This plot device invites reflection on what defines individuality: genetics, memories, experiences, or choices. Alice's confrontation with her clones suggests a fragmented selfhood, forcing her to assert her own authenticity and agency in a world where even her identity can be replicated and commodified. This existential conflict adds psychological depth to what could have been a straightforward action hero narrative. In addition, the film's pacing of character arcs is tightly interwoven with the unfolding plot, creating moments where emotional beats coincide with action sequences. For example, the convoy's precarious journey across the desert is punctuated by interpersonal conflicts, moments of vulnerability, and demonstrations of loyalty. These character-driven moments ground the film's high-energy spectacle, ensuring that viewers remain invested in the human stakes amid the chaos. The balance of action and character development is one of Extinction's strengths, giving emotional resonance to otherwise fast-paced sequences. In conclusion, the character development and arcs in Resident Evil, Extinction provide a layered and engaging human element to a story dominated by bioengineered horrors and apocalyptic landscapes. Alice's journey from isolated survivor to symbol of resistance, Claire's emergence as a moral leader, Carlos's sacrifice, and the unfolding identity crisis all contribute to a narrative that explores not only survival, but the complexities of selfhood, loyalty, and hope. These arcs enrich the film, inviting audiences to connect emotionally with the characters and reflect on larger themes of humanity amid destruction. The visual storytelling of Resident Evil, Extinction is deeply enhanced by its thoughtful costume and set design, both of which play pivotal roles in establishing the film's harsh, post-apocalyptic world and in defining the characters' identities within it. Unlike the typical sterile sci-fi lab environments seen in previous entries, Extinction's design choices reflect a world that has been ravaged and left to decay, creating an immersive atmosphere that grounds the story's dystopian themes. The costumes and sets do more than provide aesthetics. They serve as extensions of character psychology, social status, and thematic motifs, reinforcing the narrative's tone and emotional undercurrents. Starting with costume design, the wardrobe choices in Extinction emphasize functionality and survivalism while still communicating subtle aspects of personality and narrative development. Alice's costumes throughout the film are practical yet symbolic. She is often dressed in sleek, dark, and form-fitting attire that combines tactical readiness with an almost militaristic style. This reflects her identity as a battle-hardened survivor and genetically enhanced warrior. Her outfits are typically black or dark gray, colors that evoke stealth, strength, and mystery and reinforce her role as the film's central figure. The consistency in her wardrobe also subtly hints at her internal struggle with identity and control. Her costume is like armor, both protective and restrictive. In contrast, Claire Redfield's costumes are deliberately more utilitarian and earth-toned, reflecting her practical, grounded nature and her role as convoy leader and caretaker. Her clothing is functional, designed for long journeys and harsh conditions, including sturdy boots, durable pants, and layered shirts. These choices visually distinguish Claire from Alice, while also reinforcing her connection to the survivors and her moral steadiness. The practical nature of Claire's costume symbolizes her approach to leadership, pragmatic, down-to-earth, and focused on the well-being of her people. The convoy members' costumes further enhance the sense of a makeshift, nomadic community. Their clothing is often a patchwork of scavenged gear, worn fabrics, and improvised protective equipment, conveying scarcity and resourcefulness. This visual cohesion among the convoy members helps create a believable community forged through shared hardship. Their costumes are marked by dirt, wear, and improvisation, emphasizing the toll the apocalypse has taken on them and their adaptability in surviving hostile environments. The antagonists, particularly Umbrella Corporation scientists and guards, wear sterile, clinical uniforms that contrast sharply with the survivors' rugged attire. This visual dichotomy underscores the corporate coldness and dehumanization represented by Umbrella. The clinical whites and grays of their uniforms emphasize order, control, and a lack of empathy, positioning them as faceless agents of oppression. Dr. Isaacs's transformation into a monstrous creature is also reflected in his appearance, with his costume shifting from white lab coats to grotesque, mutated flesh, reinforcing his descent from scientist to monster. Makeup and special effects also contribute significantly to costume design by enhancing the physicality and horror of the infected creatures. The infected's grotesque appearance, decayed skin, exposed muscles, and unnatural movements is achieved through a combination of prosthetics, makeup, and digital effects. This visceral aesthetic creates a strong contrast between the survivors' human fragility and the monstrous, dehumanized infected, visually reinforcing the stakes of the story. Set design in Extinction is characterized by a careful balance between desolation and functionality. The film opens with wide shots of barren deserts, abandoned towns, and ruined cities, establishing the scale of the apocalypse. The landscapes are bleak and sun-bleached, with sandy expanses and rusted remnants of human civilization creating a haunting, post-apocalyptic tableau. These locations are not just backgrounds, they function as characters themselves, embodying the devastation and loneliness of a world turned hostile. The convoy's mobile compound is one of the film's most important set pieces. Designed to resemble a fortified convoy of trucks and makeshift shelters, it symbolizes human resilience and adaptability. The convoy is cluttered but functional, with spaces for rest, planning, and defense, representing a fragile bastion of community in an unforgiving world. The design of the convoy balances a gritty realism with imaginative survivalist creativity, with details like scavenged armor plating, rooftop lookout posts, and improvised weaponry. These elements provide visual cues about the survivors' resourcefulness and constant vigilance. Interior sets, such as the underground Umbrella facility, present a stark contrast to the open, desolate exteriors. The lab environments are sterile, cold, and claustrophobic, dominated by metallic surfaces, fluorescent lighting, and minimalist design. This sterile aesthetic conveys the ruthless efficiency of Umbrella's operations and serves as a reminder of the dehumanizing forces at play. The juxtaposition of the clinical interiors with the organic horror of the creatures contained within the labs creates a tension that is both visual and thematic. Notable is the use of color within the sets to communicate mood and theme. The outdoor scenes rely heavily on a desaturated, almost monochrome color palette dominated by beige, brown, and gray tones that emphasize the environmental devastation. In contrast, The interior scenes within Umbrella's labs incorporate colder colors, blues, whites, and metallic grays, that evoke detachment and artificiality. This color dichotomy visually reinforces the themes of natural decay versus synthetic control. The filmmakers also made deliberate choices in selecting real-world filming locations that enhanced the authenticity of the post-apocalyptic landscape. The deserts of Nevada and California provided expansive, harsh environments that naturally conveyed isolation and desolation. Abandoned towns and industrial ruins added texture and depth, allowing the sets to feel lived in and believable rather than staged. These real-world environments help the actors immerse themselves in the story, and they lend a palpable sense of realism to the film's dystopian vision. The design team paid close attention to the integration of practical effects with digital enhancements to maintain continuity between costumes and sets. This is particularly evident in scenes involving the infected and bioengineered creatures, where makeup and animatronics were blended seamlessly with CGI to create convincing monsters that inhabited the same world as the human characters. This integration helped maintain suspension of disbelief and deepened audience engagement. The dialogue and scriptwriting in Resident Evil: Extinction serve as foundational elements that shape the film's narrative flow, character development, and tone. While the Resident Evil franchise is often celebrated more for its action sequences and visual spectacle than its writing, Extinction offers moments of impactful dialogue and screenplay choices that reveal character motivations, build tension, and provide exposition without overwhelming the pacing. The script balances straightforward, functional lines with occasional deeper thematic reflections, all the while accommodating the fast-moving, often intense nature of a post-apocalyptic survival story. The screenplay is structured around a clear narrative goal: the survivor's journey across the desert and the infiltration of Umbrella's facility, which means much of the dialogue is purpose-driven. Conversations often focus on strategy, survival, and interpersonal dynamics within the convoy, helping to establish group cohesion and individual character traits. The writing reflects the harsh realities of the world the characters inhabit, with terse, clipped exchanges that convey urgency and tension. This economical style keeps scenes moving briskly, which is important given the film's emphasis on action and suspense. Alice's dialogue is particularly revealing in terms of her character arc. Her lines often reflect her internal conflicts and growing doubts about her identity and purpose. While Alice is generally a woman of action rather than words, key moments of dialogue provide insight into her mindset, such as her reflections on the cost of survival and her role in the fight against Umbrella. Her speech tends to be direct, sometimes cryptic, which fits her persona as a genetically modified soldier with fragmented memories. These lines create an aura of mystery around her character and invite the audience to piece together her fragmented identity alongside her. Claire Redfield's dialogue contrasts with Alice's. It is more grounded, empathetic, and pragmatic. Claire often acts as the convoy's moral compass, and her lines frequently emphasize hope, responsibility, and the importance of community. The script gives her moments to assert leadership and offer reassurance, which helps establish her as a stabilizing force. This difference in speech patterns between Alice and Claire enhances their dynamic and allows the audience to understand their complementary roles. Claire's dialogue also introduces exposition about the convoy's situation and Umbrella's ongoing threat in a natural, believable way, avoiding heavy-handedness. The convoy members provide additional layers to the script's dialogue, often injecting moments of levity or tension that enrich the group dynamics. For instance, characters like Kmart and Nick offer colloquial, informal speech that contrasts with the more serious tones of Alice and Claire, helping to humanize the survivors and make the group feel authentic. Their banter and occasional disagreements add realism and emotional texture, reminding viewers that the convoy is a fragile community shaped by varied personalities. The antagonists, particularly Dr. Isaacs and Umbrella personnel, speak in a more clinical, detached manner. Their dialogue is often laced with corporate jargon and scientific terminology, emphasizing their roles as dehumanized agents of Umbrella Corporation. Dr. Isaacs's lines underscore his cold ambition and obsession with genetic experimentation, which helps define his character's villainous nature. The script uses his dialogue to reveal Umbrella's motivations and to heighten the stakes by exposing the corporation's unethical practices. However, the villain's dialogue is relatively minimal, allowing his monstrous transformations and actions to convey menace more effectively than words. One of the challenges of the script is balancing necessary exposition with maintaining suspense and pacing. Given the film's complex backstory involving viral outbreaks, genetic engineering, and Umbrella Corporation's machinations, the screenplay incorporates dialogue to clarify plot points without bogging down the action. For example, conversations between characters often include brief explanations about the T-virus, the cloning experiments, or the convoy's goals. These moments are carefully crafted to be concise and relevant, ensuring that the audience remains informed without feeling overwhelmed. This is crucial in a franchise with a dedicated fanbase and newcomers alike. Memorable lines in the film tend to be succinct and impactful rather than overly elaborate. Alice's statements often carry a tone of grim determination or philosophical reflection, such as her remarks about survival and identity. These lines resonate because they encapsulate larger themes within short phrases, making them memorable. Similarly, Claire's speeches emphasize solidarity and resilience, which serve to inspire both the characters within the story and the audience. While the film does not aim to be a dialogue-driven drama, these moments of clarity add emotional weight and thematic coherence. The script also employs humor sparingly but effectively. Given the dark, intense atmosphere, moments of lightness or sarcasm from secondary characters provide brief relief and deepen character relationships. These touches of humor humanize the survivors and make their struggles more relatable. However, the humor never undercuts the seriousness of the plot, maintaining the film's overall tone and tension. Pacing of dialogue is another important element. Conversations are generally brief, with exchanges that mirror real-life urgency in dangerous situations. Long monologues or extended discussions are avoided, which keeps the narrative momentum intact. The editing complements this script style by cutting swiftly between dialogue and action, ensuring that the film's tempo remains dynamic and engaging. This brisk pacing helps maintain audience interest and supports the film's action-oriented approach. The screenplay also uses silence and minimal dialogue strategically. In several scenes, the absence of speech heightens tension and allows the actors' physical performances and the atmosphere to communicate emotion. This is especially effective in suspenseful or climactic moments, where dialogue might dilute the impact. The film's ability to convey mood and character through nonverbal communication is an important scriptwriting strength. In terms of building tension and emotion, the script skillfully balances exposition with moments of vulnerability and confrontation among characters. Interpersonal conflicts, such as disagreements within the convoy or Alice's struggle with her identity, are expressed through pointed dialogue that reveals character motivations and advances the plot. These exchanges deepen the audience's understanding of the characters' psychological states and raise the stakes for their survival. The marketing and promotion campaign for Resident Evil Extinction played a crucial role in positioning the film as a major summer release and maintaining momentum for the Resident Evil franchise. Building on the commercial success of the earlier films, Umbrella Entertainment and Sony Pictures undertook a multifaceted approach designed to capture the attention of established fans as well as new audiences drawn to action horror and post-apocalyptic genres. The campaign effectively combined traditional advertising, strategic partnerships, and innovative digital engagement to create anticipation and reinforce the film's brand identity. One of the earliest marketing strategies involved the release of teaser trailers that emphasized the film's heightened action sequences and apocalyptic setting. These teasers showcased intense desert chases, hordes of infected creatures, and the return of Alice, played by Milla Jovovich, whose star power was a central promotional asset. The trailers were crafted to appeal to fans of the franchise by highlighting familiar elements like the T-virus, Umbrella Corporation, and Alice's evolving powers, while also drawing in new viewers with the promise of larger-scale destruction and more complex character dynamics. The tone of the trailers struck a balance between horror and science fiction action, which helped broaden the film's appeal. In addition to trailers, visually striking posters and billboards were deployed across major markets. The film's poster prominently featured Alice standing alone against a stark, sun-bleached desert backdrop, clad in her signature black tactical outfit and carrying weapons. This imagery reinforced themes of isolation, resilience, and survival, encapsulating the film's narrative essence in a single frame. Other promotional posters highlighted the film's antagonists and the infected, tapping into the horror aspects of the story to attract genre fans. The use of minimalist yet powerful visuals helped the marketing materials stand out amid a crowded summer slate. The marketing campaign also leveraged multimedia tie-ins to extend the film's reach. Video games inspired by the Resident Evil franchise, both existing and those developed to coincide with the film's release, were used to cross-promote the movie. These interactive experiences allowed fans to engage with the Resident Evil universe more deeply and maintained interest in the film's storyline and characters. Similarly, merchandise such as action figures, apparel, and collectibles featuring Alice and other characters provided fans with tangible connections to the film, helping to build a sense of community and fandom. Digital marketing played an increasingly important role in the promotion of Extinction. Official websites offered trailers, character bios, behind-the-scenes content, and interactive features designed to immerse visitors in the film's world. Social media platforms, though still emerging as promotional tools at the time, were utilized to generate buzz, share updates, and engage directly with fans. Viral marketing tactics included cryptic messages and clues related to Umbrella Corporation's lore, creating an element of mystery and encouraging fan speculation and discussion. These strategies helped maintain excitement and sustained awareness in the months leading up to release. Premieres and promotional events were strategically held to maximize media coverage and fan engagement. Red carpet events in major cities featured appearances by the cast and director Russell Mulcahy, generating photo opportunities and interviews that amplified the film's visibility. These events often included fan screenings and contests, fostering a sense of exclusivity and rewarding dedicated followers. Interviews and press junkets allowed the creative team to discuss the film's themes, production challenges, and character arcs, humanizing the movie and generating deeper interest. Partnerships with media outlets and sponsors also played a role in extending the film's promotional reach. Collaborations with magazines, entertainment websites, and television programs included exclusive content, feature articles, and special previews. Promotional partnerships with companies aligned with the film's themes, such as technology brands or energy drink companies, helped tap into target demographics, particularly young adults interested in gaming, science fiction, and horror. These alliances enhanced the film's cultural penetration and broadened its marketing scope beyond traditional cinema audiences. Innovative promotional strategies included the use of viral marketing campaigns that capitalized on the Resident Evil franchise's mythology. Umbrella Corporation, the fictional entity central to the series' narrative, was represented in some marketing materials as a real entity, creating immersive alternate reality games and online puzzles that invited fans to uncover Umbrella's secrets. This approach blurred the lines between fiction and reality, deepening fan engagement and building a dedicated community around the film's release. These tactics exemplified early efforts in viral marketing that have since become more common in blockbuster film promotions. The film's release strategy also reflected careful marketing considerations. Timed for a late summer release, Extinction aimed to capitalize on a period when audiences sought blockbuster entertainment, especially genre films offering escapism and spectacle. The timing allowed the film to benefit from a relatively open competitive landscape, giving it a strong chance to perform well at the box office. Marketing efforts intensified in the weeks leading up to release, focusing on TV spots, online ads, and street-level promotions in key markets. Despite the strong marketing push, the campaign also faced challenges. Some critics and segments of the audience perceived the promotional materials as heavily reliant on franchise familiarity, which risked alienating newcomers. Moreover, the film's darker, more serious tone contrasted with some of the more campy or horror-centric marketing images, creating a slight mismatch in audience expectations. Nevertheless, the campaign's overall effectiveness is evident in the film's solid box office performance and continued franchise momentum. In conclusion, the marketing and promotion of Resident Evil, Extinction combined traditional and innovative strategies to create a comprehensive campaign that engaged diverse audiences. Through targeted trailers, compelling visuals, interactive digital content, strategic partnerships, and immersive viral marketing, the campaign successfully built anticipation and reinforced the film's place within a popular and expanding franchise. The promotional efforts not only contributed to the film's commercial success, but also helped sustain the Resident Evil brand as a significant force in action horror cinema. Resident Evil Extinction occupies an interesting position within the broader Resident Evil film series as well as within the genre of action horror and post-apocalyptic cinema. When comparing Extinction to its predecessors, the earlier Resident Evil 2002 and Resident Evil Apocalypse 2004, as well as to other similar films, it becomes clear how the film distinguishes itself in tone, style, and narrative focus. It also sets a precedent for later sequels and adaptations, influencing the trajectory of the franchise and its place within the wider horror and science fiction landscape. One of the most significant differences between Extinction and the first two Resident Evil films is the shift in setting and scale. While the original Resident Evil introduced audiences to the claustrophobic horror of the Umbrella Corporation's underground hive and the outbreak contained within a single building, and Apocalypse expanded the narrative into the urban chaos of Raccoon City, Extinction takes a bold leap into a vast, desolate desert wasteland. This shift broadens the scope from contained survival horror to open-world, post-apocalyptic survival, reflecting a narrative evolution from immediate containment to global disaster and ongoing conflict. This change in setting allows Extinction to explore themes of isolation and endurance in a way the earlier films could not. In terms of tone, Extinction adopts a darker, more serious mood compared to the often campier or more overtly horror-driven atmosphere of Apocalypse. While the first film blended horror and action with a gothic sensibility, and Apocalypse included moments of camp and comic relief amid its terror, Extinction presents a grimmer, more somber narrative focused on loss, identity, and resilience. This tonal shift aligns it more closely with dystopian science fiction films like The Road or Mad Max, emphasizing survival in a barren world over jump scares or traditional zombie horror. The film's emphasis on character-driven drama and psychological tension sets it apart from its predecessors, highlighting a maturation of the franchise. Cinematically, Extinction benefits from director Russell Mulcahy's background in music videos and stylistic filmmaking, resulting in visually dynamic sequences with strong emphasis on composition, lighting, and color palettes. Compared to Paul W. S. Anderson's direction in the first two films, which leaned more towards straightforward action horror, Mulcahy injects a distinctive aesthetic sensibility that enhances the film's immersive atmosphere. The use of wide shots of the desert landscape, the interplay of shadows and harsh sunlight, and the stylized action scenes contribute to a more polished and visually arresting presentation. In terms of character focus, Extinction places greater emphasis on Alice's internal struggle and her evolving identity. While Alice has always been central to the series, this installment delves more deeply into her psychological complexities and moral ambiguities. This contrasts with the earlier films where Alice functioned more as a traditional action heroine. Here, her fragmented memories, genetic modifications, and ethical dilemmas add depth to her character arc, moving the narrative beyond simple survival toward questions of humanity and agency. The introduction of characters like Claire Redfield also adds emotional grounding and expands the franchise's character base, enhancing relational dynamics absent in earlier entries. When compared to other post-apocalyptic and zombie films released around the same time, Resident Evil Extinction distinguishes itself by blending high-octane action with science fiction elements rooted in genetic engineering and corporate conspiracy. Unlike traditional zombie movies such as Dawn of the Dead or 28 Days Later, which focus heavily on the horror and social collapse aspects of outbreaks, Extinction incorporates a futuristic sci-fi framework through Umbrella Corporation's experiments and Alice's enhanced abilities. This hybrid genre approach broadens its appeal and differentiates it from more conventional zombie fare. However, some critics argue that Extinction's emphasis on spectacle and action at times comes at the expense of tighter storytelling or character development compared to more nuanced post-apocalyptic dramas like Children of Men, or The Road. While the film offers compelling visuals and intense sequences, its plot can occasionally feel fragmented or driven by franchise continuity rather than standalone coherence. This reflects a common challenge faced by long-running franchises, balancing fan service with fresh narrative innovation. Looking at the film in the context of the entire Resident Evil film series, Extinction serves as a crucial turning point. It expands the narrative universe, introduces new thematic concerns, and deepens the protagonist's complexity. It also sets the stage for future installments to explore Alice's journey further and to escalate the conflict with Umbrella Corporation. Sequels such as Resident Evil: Afterlife build directly on the foundation laid by Extinction, with its post-apocalyptic tone and visual style influencing the direction of the franchise. Moreover, Extinction's success helped solidify Milla Jovovich's star status as Alice and reinforced the franchise's viability as a multi-film saga. This contrasts with earlier adaptations of video games that struggled to find sustained success. The film's blend of action, horror, and sci-fi elements created a blueprint that later entries and other genre films could emulate. Its integration of a strong female lead with complex motivations and physical prowess also contributed to the growing trend of female-driven action films in the mid-2000s. In comparing Extinction to other works by director Russell Mulcahy, known for his visually distinctive style and work in music videos and films like Highlander, one can see how his influence shaped the film's aesthetic and narrative rhythms. Mulcahy's penchant for striking visuals and atmospheric storytelling elevates Extinction above the typical video game adaptation, giving it a cinematic flair that distinguishes it from many peers. His direction emphasizes mood and environment as narrative tools, enriching the film's storytelling beyond dialogue and action. In summary, Resident Evil: Extinction stands out within the franchise and genre through its expanded scope, tonal maturity, and visual sophistication. It marks a departure from the contained horror of earlier films toward a sprawling, character-driven survival epic. Its blending of science fiction, horror, and action creates a hybrid that appeals to diverse audiences. While it faces challenges common to sequels and franchise entries, Extinction's contributions to character development, thematic depth, and cinematic style make it a significant installment. Its influence is evident in subsequent films within the series and in the broader landscape of action horror cinema, where it helped define the evolving possibilities of video game adaptations and female-led genre films.